All right, today we're taking a look at Titus chapter 2. We're going to look at it together, some of our highlights before you read it for yourself. JD, what I see here in verse 1, Paul is saying, hey, Titus, make sure that your lifestyle reflects your teaching. And that's really good for anyone who wants to be a mentor or a pastor or a leader, is don't just preach it. Don't be a hypocrite, but actually live it. And I think that's what he's saying here, right? Paul is getting specific.
And a father.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
And a husband.
Yeah, and so then he sort of, as we go down the chapter here, he's talking about what you should teach older men to do and how you should teach older women to live, and that older women should train up and mentor younger women, which is great. This is a great verse. Verse 5 is great for anyone who wants to mentor or anyone who feels like maybe they shouldn't mentor. You need to read this because Paul is saying, no, Titus, this is part of the strategy, is have the older women mentor the younger women, right?
I like verse 9 for me, though.
Mm-hmm.
It speaks to me as a worker. It uses the word slaves,
yeah.
But I've come to realize that they're not really discussing slaves as we think of them in our time, but it's more of just people that, workers, just blue collar, white collar workers. And for me, when I realized how I was thinking, talking, and acting, at work was not necessarily anywhere near a God honoring kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
So once I figured that out, it was a real turn on how I acted.
Yeah.
And how I spoke.
Yeah, and that's what Paul's saying to Titus. He's saying, hey, don't let the people's faith be something that they only exercise at church or at small group, but it should impact all of your life. And so maybe even verses 9, 10, and 11 are really maybe the most important ones for some people today, because they don't even think about how their faith impacts their work.
Exactly.
And I like what he says in 11. He says, for the grace of God has been revealed, bringing salvation to all people, right? So remember, he was just talking about men and women and older women and young men and slaves and workers. And now he's kind of recapping almost in 11. He says, God's grace brings salvation to everyone. God doesn't just go after fishermen. He doesn't just go after Pharisees. He doesn't just go after men or just women. It's for everyone. But then in verse 12, he says, but we're instructed to turn from godless living and sinful pleasures, that we should live in this evil world. Remember, he's writing to Titus and sending him to Crete, where this culture was pretty evil and backwards. But he says, even in that culture, we should live with wisdom, righteousness, and devotion to God.
And it's nice that he recognizes where we are and acknowledges it. And like I said, I really like this whole Titus thing because it's so practical. It's so straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's put that image up again. So, right, we're talking about the second arrow in this circle, right? He's saying, don't just be Christians who trust Jesus in word, but make sure that you do it in deed, and that your lifestyle now reflects it, that you live to honor God. So some of you reading this, as you read chapter 2, maybe God will convict you to say, I need to let my actions and my lifestyle, both at home and at work, at school, if you're a student, I need to let that reflect my faith a little bit more. I think that's what Paul's getting at here.
And then he wraps it up in the very last verse 15. He says you must teach or mentor others as well. Yeah. And I think that's important. You need to work on yourself, but then you need to make sure you help others.
You help others do it. Yeah, that's good. And so I think if you read verse 1 and then as it closes in verse 15, it just really kind of bookends this whole thing. And I love what he says at the end. You have the authority to correct people when necessary. And so don't let anyone disregard what you say. JD, I think this is a good one maybe to show to our wives.
That could be misunderstood or misapplied if you're not careful. That's all I'm going to say. Be careful.